Her stepbrother carried bags out of the house. Inside those bags were the remains of 16-year-old Becky Watts. Freeze that moment. How did it come to this? On a quiet February morning in Bristol, 16-year-old Becky Watts sent her last text to her boyfriend. Just 2 words, listening to music. It sounded so normal. Just another teenage moment. But those words would be the last thing she ever wrote. Minutes later, silence. Her phone, usually buzzing with messages, went dark. No replies. No updates on social media. For Becky, who was always online, that silence was the first red flag. Her boyfriend tried calling. No answer. Her friends sent texts. Nothing came back. At first, maybe it looked like a teenager needing space. But as the hours passed, worry turned into fear. At her father's home, panic began to spread. Becky was not the kind of girl to just disappear. She had plans. She had people who loved her waiting for her. Family photos show Becky smiling, eyes full of energy. Friends remembered her as loyal, kind, the type of girl who noticed when someone was left out. Teachers called her caring and gentle. At just 16, she carried the light of someone who made the world feel less lonely. But behind those pictures, behind those smiles, a darker story was about to unfold. One that would tear apart her family, shock an entire city, and leave the country asking how this could ever happen. And before we go deeper, I need you to stop for a moment. Hit subscribe, because these cases aren't just stories you watch and forget. They are warnings. And if you turn away, if you ignore them, the next victim could be someone you love. Now, let's begin. Becky Watts was 16. She wasn't a celebrity. She wasn't known outside her city. She was just a teenager living in Bristol. But to the people who knew her, she was unforgettable. Her family called her lively, funny, and strong-willed. At home, she had a sharp sense of humor and a feisty personality. With her closest friends, she was the life of the room, joking, laughing, always loyal. But in public, at school, Becky could be quiet, almost shy. Teachers described her as kind, empathetic, the type of student who noticed if someone was left out and made sure they weren't alone. Becky wasn't the kind of girl who drifted from one crowd to another. She kept her circle small, but if you were inside that circle, her loyalty ran deep. She was also creative. She loved music, fashion, and had the spark of a teenager figuring out who she was. Like any 16-year-old, she had her moods. But beneath it all, Becky had a huge heart, and she was deeply loved. That's why the morning of February 19, 2015, shook her family to the core. It began with something so ordinary. Becky sent her boyfriend a short text, listening to music. Just 2 words. Harmless, normal. But that text was the last anyone ever heard from her. Minutes later, Becky was gone. Her phone, which was usually buzzing with notifications, suddenly went silent. No new texts, no posts, no calls answered. For a teenager in 2015, when life revolved around your phone, silence like that wasn't just unusual. It was terrifying. Her boyfriend tried calling. No response. Her closest friends sent messages. Nothing came back. By afternoon, her father Darren grew worried. He dialed Becky's number over and over, straight to voicemail. At first, maybe it looked like a teenage mood swing. Maybe she needed space or had gone for a walk. But Darren knew his daughter. This wasn't her. Becky didn't vanish without telling someone. She didn't disappear without a word. As the hours passed, worry hardened into fear. Darren and his wife Angie searched every corner of the house. No sign. They called hospitals. Nothing. They reached out to Becky's friends, asking if she was with them. Nobody had seen her. By evening, they called the police. A missing person report was filed. That night, Bristol began to hear Becky's name. A local girl, 16, gone without a trace. The search began. Posters with Becky's photo, her bright smile, appeared in shop windows, bus stops, community centers. Strangers stopped to study her face, to memorize her features. Volunteers gathered to search streets, alleys, and parks. Helicopters circled above the city. Police combed through nearby woods and lakes. Divers searched the water. Detectives knocked on doors. Online, the hashtag #FindBecky spread across Facebook and Twitter. Thousands of people shared her picture, pleading for information. Becky's disappearance became a city-wide mission. For her family, every hour felt like a lifetime. Darren went on camera, voice cracking. begging anyone who knew anything to come forward. He said, "Becky, if you can see this, we love you. Please come home." But no call came. No text, no trace. And as each day passed, hope was harder to hold on to. Because the truth was, Becky didn't run away. Becky didn't just vanish. Something darker was at play. Something hiding in plain sight, much closer than anyone ever imagined. The city of Bristol was on edge. What started as one family's nightmare had now grown into a public emergency. Police mobilized quickly. Search teams were dispatched into neighborhoods, parks, fields, even rivers. Helicopters circled above, scanning the ground for any sign of Becky. Officers on horseback patrolled country paths. Volunteers combed through forests, searching under every branch, every leaf, every stone. Posters of Becky's face went up everywhere. Shop windows, bus stops, street corners. Her smile, once just a family memory, was now a symbol of urgency for an entire city. Every poster carried the same message: missing, 16 years old. Please help us find her. The media storm exploded. News outlets across the UK picked up the story. Every newscast carried Becky's photo, her age, her description. Reporters crowded the streets of Bristol, broadcasting live updates as the search expanded. The country was watching. At the heart of it all was her father, Darren. Desperate, broken, his voice cracked as he stood before the cameras, begging for help. He pleaded, "Becky, if you can hear this, we love you. Please come home. If anyone knows anything, please say something." His words captured the nation, but behind the tears, there was something else: dread. Because Darren knew his daughter, and deep down, he feared what others were beginning to realize. Days passed. The city kept searching. Volunteers kept knocking on doors. Police dogs were brought in. Detectives followed every lead. But nothing made sense. Becky had simply vanished, and the silence was unbearable. No ransom note, no phone call, no trace. But the truth was this: the answers weren't out in the woods. They weren't in the lakes or the parks. The clues weren't out there at all. They were inside her own home. By now, 9 days had passed since Becky vanished. The posters were everywhere. Helicopters circled the skies. The city was restless, desperate for answers. But detectives knew something didn't add up. So they began retracing Becky's final hours. Who saw her last? Who was inside that house the morning she disappeared? That question led them straight to her stepbrother, Nathan Matthews, and his girlfriend, Shauna Hoare. At first, the pair looked calm. Too calm. When police knocked, they didn't appear worried, or shaken, or even surprised. Instead, they seemed strangely collected, almost as if they had rehearsed what to say. Both Nathan and Shauna sat for questioning, and both gave the exact same account, almost word for word. They claimed they had heard Becky stomping down the stairs that morning, slamming the front door behind her. They said they thought she'd left the house upset, maybe in a mood, and that was it. But detectives had been doing this too long. People don't usually remember things in the exact same way. One person might say the door slammed loudly. Another might recall what she was wearing. The little details are always different. But Nathan and Shauna? Their stories matched perfectly. Every word, every pause. And that didn't feel right. It felt rehearsed. It felt wrong. Detectives also paid close attention to their behavior. Shauna giggled through her interview, smiling as if none of this was serious. Nathan, on the other hand, showed no real emotion. He wasn't worried, wasn't angry, wasn't broken up about his missing stepsister. He was cold, detached, almost as if he already knew the ending. This raised suspicion, but suspicion wasn't proof. Investigators needed more. That's when they decided to take another look at Becky's home. On February 28th, 9 days after Becky's disappearance, forensic teams returned to Darren's house for a deeper search. This time, they weren't just looking for signs of a runaway. They were hunting for signs of foul play. The team moved slowly, carefully, combing through every room. And, in Becky's bedroom, they made a chilling discovery. On the white doorframe leading into her room, tiny, faint traces of blood, almost invisible to the naked eye, but under forensic testing, clear enough to reveal the truth. Even more disturbing, inside those blood traces was a fingerprint. When the fingerprint was analyzed, the results were undeniable. It belonged to Nathan Matthews, her own stepbrother, and when the blood was tested, the final blow came. It was Becky's. In that moment, the search for a missing girl became something far darker. This wasn't just a disappearance. This was a crime scene. Something violent had happened inside Becky's own home. And now police knew. The focus wasn't out in the streets, or the woods, or the lakes. The focus was inside the family. And if you haven't subscribed yet, ask yourself this. Would you want your daughter's case to fade into silence? Subscribing here means her story, and others like it, will never be forgotten. February 28, 2015. Just hours after forensic results confirmed Becky's blood and Nathan's fingerprint in her bedroom, detectives made their move. Police stormed into Nathan Matthews' world. He and his girlfriend, Shauna Hoare, were arrested. The city held its breath. For more than a week, people had searched the streets, the parks, the woods. Now, all eyes turned to one couple. Detectives then turned their attention to Nathan and Shauna's home. What they found inside would only deepen the horror. The moment investigators stepped through the door, they were struck by the chaos. Rooms overflowing with clutter, bags of clothes stacked against walls, papers scattered, dishes piled high. It was the kind of mess that told a story of neglect, of lives in disarray. But in the middle of that mess, one detail stopped everyone cold. The bathroom. Unlike the rest of the house, the bathtub was spotless, gleaming, almost shining, scrubbed so clean it seemed out of place. Investigators knew right away. In a house like this, nothing should look that clean. The bathtub wasn't just clean, it was too clean, and that made it suspicious. They moved carefully, photographing every inch, documenting every surface. They were searching for proof, and they were about to find it. As they dug deeper, they uncovered receipts, slips of paper that at first glance looked ordinary. But the dates told a darker story. On the very day Becky went missing, Nathan had walked into a hardware store. The receipts showed exactly what he purchased: a circular saw, protective goggles, gloves, a mask. And when police pulled the store's CCTV, there he was, Nathan Matthews, caught on camera, buying the tools of something unthinkable. This wasn't the behavior of a worried stepbrother. This wasn't someone desperate to find Becky. This was someone preparing to hide a crime. News of the arrests spread quickly across Bristol. Crowds gathered outside the home, angry, confused, heartbroken. How could the people closest to Becky, the people she called family, be the ones tied to her disappearance? Her father, Darren, later said that in that moment, it felt like his world was collapsing. The hope he had clung to, that Becky was still alive somewhere, was slipping away. And then, police made the discovery that broke the city's heart. What they found next would confirm everyone's worst fears. Detectives sifted through the receipts recovered from Nathan and Shauna's home. The evidence was chilling in its simplicity. A circular saw, protective goggles, gloves, a mask, all purchased the very day Becky was reported missing. The CCTV footage confirmed it. There was Nathan Matthews walking casually through the hardware store, buying items that would soon become central to one of the darkest cases in Bristol's history. It was damning. It was undeniable. But the full truth was even worse. Days later, through his lawyer, Nathan made a statement. He confessed. His words echoed through the police station. "I killed Becky." But his explanation was as twisted as the crime itself. Nathan claimed he hadn't meant to murder his stepsister. He said he had only planned to teach her a lesson. His story was that Becky was selfish, a burden on his mother's health. So, according to him, he plotted to kidnap her, to scare her, to silence her. But when Becky saw his face during the attack, he panicked. And in that panic, he strangled her. It was a thin excuse, a weak attempt to paint a horrific act as an accident, because the evidence told a darker truth. Late one night, acting on new intelligence, detectives launched a raid on a property at Barton Court in the Barton Hill area of Bristol. They believed something unspeakable was hidden there. Inside the small terrace house, officers searched room after room, then moved to the garden. And there, they found the bags, suitcases, plastic bags, wrapped tightly in cling film, covered in cat litter and salt. Inside those bags were the dismembered remains of 16-year-old Becky Watts. The discovery broke the city's heart. Police immediately informed the family. Hope was gone. The worst fears were now reality. News spread quickly. Across Bristol, flowers and tributes appeared outside the family's home. St. Ambrose Church opened its doors, where strangers lit candles and wrote in books of remembrance. Vigils were held. Hundreds gathered. holding candles against the night sky. Becky's father Darren collapsed with grief. Her brother Dan, who had once spent hours playing video games with Nathan, was forced to accept the unthinkable. His own stepbrother had destroyed their family. The weight of that revelation was unbearable. A daughter, a sister, a friend, gone forever. And while Becky's family wept, Nathan and Shauna's secrets were just beginning to surface. Think of this. While you're watching, another case just like Becky's is unfolding. If you don't subscribe, you'll never hear it. Until it's too late. As detectives pieced the case together, one truth became undeniable. What happened to Becky wasn't sudden. It wasn't a mistake. The seeds of this crime had been planted years earlier. Nathan Matthews' troubling history stretched back long before Becky's disappearance. Family members recalled moments that now seemed like warnings, disturbing flashes of behavior that at the time were brushed off, but in hindsight, painted a terrifying picture. When Nathan was just 19, he showed up at the family's home with 4 young girls crammed in the back of his car. None of them appeared older than 12. His father Darren was horrified. He refused to let Nathan bring them inside, ordering him to take the girls home immediately. That moment lingered like a shadow, proof that Nathan's interests were not just unusual, but dangerous. Years later, when Becky struggled with an eating disorder, her family rallied around her with concern. But Nathan didn't. Instead of care, he showed cruelty. He mocked her illness. He called it attention-seeking. To him, Becky's suffering was just another nuisance. By the time Nathan was 21, he introduced his new girlfriend to the family, a girl named Shauna. Nathan told everyone she was 19, but the truth? She was only 15. Darren caught the lie immediately. He confronted Nathan, demanded he take Shauna home, but Nathan ignored him. He kept seeing her, and despite the warnings, despite the risk, they stayed together. In time, they even had a daughter. But behind closed doors, their relationship was far from normal. When police later seized Shauna's phone, they uncovered disturbing messages between her and Nathan. Messages that revealed not just sick jokes, but dangerous fantasies. In one text, Shauna bragged about nearly knocking out a schoolgirl to take her home. In another, she casually suggested hiding a young girl in their attic. It was chilling, and the deeper detectives went, the more depraved it became. Their internet history showed hours of searches for pornography centered on teenage girls. Content disturbingly close to Becky's own age. This wasn't just talk. This wasn't just curiosity. It was obsession, a shared fantasy, a hunger that grew stronger the longer they fed it. And Becky, 16 years old, innocent, trusting, and family, became the target. Reporter pause, heavy silence, then the line. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a moment of panic. This was a fantasy. Turned real. October 2015. 8 long months after Becky vanished, the case reached Bristol Crown Court. For Becky's family, walking into that building was like stepping into another nightmare. On one side sat the people accused of destroying their daughter's life. On the other, her grieving family, clutching photos, holding back tears, desperate for justice. The trial drew national attention. Cameras crowded outside, reporters filed daily updates. But inside the courtroom, it was quiet, heavy. And then, the evidence began. Jurors listened as the prosecution unfolded the case in painful detail. Piece by piece, the story of Becky's final moments was laid bare. They heard how Nathan attacked Becky inside her own bedroom, how he suffocated her as she fought desperately for air, how he dragged her small frame, lifeless, out of the room she had decorated with teenage posters and personal touches. They heard about the hardware store receipts, the circular saw, the gloves, the goggles, the mask. They heard about the spotless bathtub, gleaming against the backdrop of a filthy, cluttered house. A bathtub scrubbed clean, not because of hygiene, but because it had become a crime scene. And then came the forensic evidence. Blood on Becky's bedroom doorframe. Nathan's fingerprint pressed inside that blood. But the most haunting detail came not from science, but from memory. A friend of Becky's took the stand. She revealed that, years earlier, Becky had confided something chilling. Nathan once described to her, in graphic detail, how he would kill her. It had sounded like a cruel, disgusting joke. Becky never told her family. She only told a friend. But now, inside that courtroom, those words felt like a prophecy fulfilled. Jurors also heard about the couple's secret world, the messages Nathan and Shauna shared, jokes about abducting schoolgirls, Fantasies about hiding young girls in their attic, their internet searches filled with pornography involving teenagers close to Becky's age. The picture was clear. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't panic. This was premeditated. This was planned. The defense tried to argue otherwise. Nathan's lawyers repeated his claim that he only wanted to teach Becky a lesson, that her death was unintentional. Shauna's defense painted her as a victim, manipulated by Nathan, dragged into something she never wanted. But the evidence was too strong. The fantasy was too clear. The horror was undeniable. And after weeks of testimony, the jury left the courtroom to deliberate. They were gone for just 3 hours. When they returned, the silence was crushing. Family members held hands, bracing for what was to come. The verdicts were read aloud. Nathan Matthews, guilty of murder and kidnap, sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 33 years. A sentence that means he will likely never leave prison alive. Shauna Hoare, found not guilty of murder, but guilty of manslaughter and kidnap. She was sentenced to 17 years. For Becky's family, there was no joy in the outcome, no real relief. Yes, justice had been delivered on paper, but it couldn't bring Becky back. It couldn't undo the horror they had lived through. Her mother, Tanya, said it felt like living through the worst kind of movie, except this was real, and it would never end. Her father, Darren, told reporters later that if the punishment had been hanging, he would have pulled the lever himself. His grief was bottomless. The city mourned with them. But for her family, the courtroom was not closure. It was simply the final confirmation of a nightmare they had already known in their hearts. Becky's story almost disappeared after the trial. The headlines faded. The cameras moved on. But the pain never left. Don't let that happen here. Don't let her story vanish into silence. If you won't subscribe, then tell us in the comments why Becky's story didn't deserve your voice. The trial was over. The verdicts had been read. Nathan Matthews would spend the rest of his life behind bars. Shauna Hoare would serve 17 years. But for Becky's family, there was no relief. Justice on paper didn't heal the wound. It didn't bring Becky home. Her father, Darren's words still echo. He said, "If the punishment had been hanging, I would have pulled the lever myself." Those weren't the words of anger alone. They were the words of a father whose world had been torn apart, whose daughter had been stolen in the most brutal way possible. In April of 2015, the city of Bristol stood still. Becky's funeral was held at St. Ambrose Church. Outside, hundreds of people lined the streets, some who knew her, many who didn't. Strangers became mourners that day. Her coffin was carried in a horse-drawn carriage, covered with white. Flowers, a heartbreaking symbol of the innocence she carried in life. When the service began, the church filled with silence, broken only by sobs and prayers. Friends clung to one another. Teachers from her school bowed their heads. Neighbors lit candles. Becky's short life had touched so many. At the end of the ceremony, a dove was released into the sky. Its wings cut through the air, a fragile sign of hope, of freedom, of peace. But for her family, it was also a reminder of everything they had lost. A daughter, a sister, a friend who would never return. After her burial, the community searched for ways to keep her memory alive. In a local park, they planted a small apple tree in Becky's honor. Just a tree, simple and unremarkable to most. But to her family, it was everything. A living memorial, a sign that life can grow even after tragedy. Over the years, Becky's friends and family described her in ways that painted her as bigger than life. To some, she was a tornado, fierce, unpredictable, full of energy. To others, she was a hurricane, a force you could never ignore. And to many, she was a sunbeam, warmth, brightness, joy. Even on the darkest days, Becky was all of these things. And though her life was stolen at just 16, her light did not fade. It carried on in the stories told about her, in the laughter remembered, in the love she left behind. But her story is not only about love, it is about betrayal. Because the person who was supposed to be family, the person who should have protected her, became the very danger that destroyed her. And that is the warning we are left with. Sometimes the greatest threats don't come from strangers lurking in the shadows. Sometimes the greatest danger comes from inside the home, from those we trust, from the people we never suspect. Becky's story is a lesson in pain, but it is also a lesson in remembrance. Because as long as we speak her name, as long as we tell her story, her light doesn't die. The next case could be the one that saves a life, or goes unsolved forever. Don't be the one who looked away. Subscribe now, and if you won't, then go into the comments and tell the world why Becky's story, and the stories of other victims like her, didn't deserve your voice.